Howdy, folks. Welcome to Saddle and Sixskin, your channel for tales of the Wild West. If you're anything like us, especially if you're over 40, you appreciate a good story of grit, perseverance, and the kind of values they don't make like they used to. We're kicking things off with a heart-wrenching tale of loss and redemption set in the harsh Arizona territory. But before we start, please be sure to like and subscribe. A deafening gunshot shattered the morning calm in the dusty streets of Willow Creek, Arizona Territory, 1879. 8-year-old Lucy Martin, clutching her beloved rag doll, stood frozen in horror. Her father's body crumpled to the ground outside the general store, the crimson stain spreading across his chest telling a story no child should ever witness. Lucy knew in that instant she was utterly alone in the world, her mother having succumbed to scarlet fever just 3 short months prior. Can you imagine the fear and despair gripping that little girl's heart? It was a harsh world, especially for those left without family or friends. The cold-hearted outlaw responsible for this tragedy spun around, mounted his horse, and vanished in a cloud of dust, leaving Lucy stranded on the wooden sidewalk. Tears streamed down her dirt-smudged face as the townsfolk, with varying degrees of emotion, rushed past her towards her father's lifeless form. Nobody seemed to notice the small girl trembling in shock, her young world collapsing around her. It's heartbreaking, isn't it, how easily a child can be overlooked in the chaos of life. These stories remind us of the vulnerability of children in the 1800s and the importance of compassion and community. "Papa," she whispered, her voice breaking as she took a hesitant step forward. The sheriff was already there, shaking his head grimly as he covered her father's face with a handkerchief. 2 days later, Lucy sat on a hard wooden bench outside the sheriff's office, her small carpet bag containing all her worldly possessions clutched tightly in her lap. Now, this is where our story takes an unexpected turn, where fate intervenes in the most unexpected way. But before we get too far into the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to Saddle and Sixskin if you are enjoying the content and want to see more tales from the Old West. Sheriff Dawson, a good man but faced with the grim realities of the time, had been kind but direct. With no known relatives, Lucy would be sent to an orphanage in Tucson on the next stage. "It'll be arriving tomorrow morning, little one," he'd explained, his weathered face softening with pity. "The sisters there will take good care of you." Lucy had heard stories about orphanages, about the cold dormitories, meager meals, and strict discipline. Can you imagine the terror welling up in that little girl's heart? It wasn't an easy life, especially for someone who'd already lost so much. She thought of her father's gentle hands braiding her hair each morning, and her mother's sweet voice singing her to sleep. Her chest ached with a hollowness that seemed impossible to fill. As the afternoon stretched on, Lucy's attention was drawn to a tall figure approaching the sheriff's office. He walked with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to long days in the saddle, his spurs jingling with each step. A true cowboy, weathered and tough, but with a hidden depth waiting to be discovered. Dust coated his leather chaps, and a well-worn Stetson shaded his face from the relentless Arizona sun. Preston Drake had been riding for 3 days straight, tracking a band of cattle rustlers who'd hit his employer's ranch. At 32, he'd spent most of his adult life working cattle across the western territories, never staying in one place long enough to put down roots. The life suited him, or at least that's what he told himself during those long, lonely nights under the stars. "Sheriff in?" Preston asked, nodding toward Lucy as he approached the bench. Lucy shrank back, saying nothing as she studied the stranger's face. His jaw was strong beneath several days' growth of beard, but it was his eyes that caught her attention, clear blue and somehow kind despite the hardness around them. Did Lucy sense something familiar in those eyes, a shared experience of loss and loneliness? A connection that would change both their lives forever. "He's talking with Reverend Miller," Lucy finally answered, her voice barely audible. Preston nodded, leaning against the porch railing to wait. He pulled out a piece of jerky from his pocket and tore off a bite. After a moment's consideration, he extended the remainder to Lucy. "Hungry?" Now, that's a simple gesture, but it speaks volumes, doesn't it? A small act of kindness that can make all the difference in the world to someone in need. Lucy hesitated before reaching out with slender fingers to accept the offering. "Thank you, Mr. Preston Drake," he offered. "Most folks call me Pre. I'm Lucy. Lucy Martin." "It's real pleased to meet you, Miss Lucy," he said, tipping his hat formally, which earned him the ghost of a smile. Before they could speak further, the door swung open and Sheriff Dawson emerged with the Reverend Drake, the sheriff acknowledged. "You got news on those rustlers? It sounds like they have a good start. Now is a perfect time to like or subscribe, if you have not already." "Track them to Bitter Creek," Preston confirmed. "Lost the trail after the rain, but thought you should know they're heading south." As the men discussed the situation, Reverend Miller turned his attention to Lucy. "The stage is all arranged for tomorrow, child. The sisters at St. Mary's are expecting you." Lucy's small fingers tightened around her doll, but she nodded silently, her eyes downcast. Preston caught the exchange and frowned slightly. "What's this about?" Sheriff Dawson sighed. "Lucy here lost her paw 2 days back, shot dead by that gunslinger passing through Sala's Tanner. Her ma passed earlier this year, got no family to speak of." "I see." Preston studied the small figure on the bench, something unfamiliar twisting in his chest. "And she's heading to an orphanage?" "Best we can do for her," the Reverend responded. "Unless you know someone looking to take in a child." Preston shifted uncomfortably. "Can't say that I do." After the sheriff provided what little information he had about the rustlers, Preston tipped his hat and prepared to leave. He had a job to finish, and sentimental distractions wouldn't help. Or so he thought. Yet, as he turned to go, Lucy's eyes met his, wide, frightened, and filled with a grief he recognized all too well. He'd been barely 12 when he'd watched his own parents' cabin burn with them inside, their screams echoing in his nightmares for years afterward. "Good luck to you, Miss Lucy," he said, his voice gruffer than intended. Lucy nodded, clutching her doll tighter. "Goodbye, Mr. Drake." That evening, Preston sat at the saloon nursing a whiskey, unable to shake the image of Lucy's forlorn face from his mind. The barkeeper, a portly man named Hank, wiped down the counter nearby. "Heard about that Martin girl?" Hank asked. "Damn shame. Her pa was a decent fella, always paid his tabs on time." "She got nobody at all?" Preston asked. "Not a soul. Martin moved here from back east after his wife took sick, hoping the dry air would help her. No family followed." Preston swirled his whiskey thoughtfully. "Orphanage is a hard life for a little one." "Better than the alternative," Hank shrugged. "Streets ain't kind to orphans, especially girls." Preston downed his drink and pushed away from the bar. He had a room at the boarding house, but sleep eluded him as he lay on the lumpy mattress, staring at the cracked ceiling. Morning found him restless and irritable, with a decision weighing heavily on his mind. The stagecoach was scheduled to depart at 9 o'clock. At 1:15, Preston found himself striding toward the sheriff's office, uncertain what he was about to do, but unable to stop himself. And so we reach the climax of this heartrending tale where a life is about to change forever, but if you're anything like me, you will be coming back, so don't forget to like and subscribe for more action in every video. Lucy sat on the same bench as the day before, her small carpet bag at her feet. Her hair had been neatly combed and braided, likely by one of the town's charitable ladies, and she wore her best dress, faded but clean. She looked up as his shadow fell across her, surprise flickering across her face. "Mr. Drake," she returned, suddenly tongue-tied. He removed his hat, turning it nervously in his hands. I heard you're leaving today," she nodded solemnly. "The stage is coming soon." Preston cleared his throat. "I was wondering, that is, how would you feel about not going to that orphanage?" Lucy's brow furrowed in confusion. "Sheriff says I have to. I don't have anybody." "Well, that's the thing," Preston continued, squatting down to meet her at eye level. "I've got a job offer. Ranch foreman position over at the Circle B, about 2 days' ride from here. Owners are old friends Ruddy Blackwell and his wife Elaine. They're good people." "What does that have to do with me?" Lucy asked, though a flicker of hope had ignited in her eyes. "I was thinking maybe you could come with me," Preston said, the words tumbling out before he could reconsider. "Elaine's always saying how quiet that big house is. They never had children of their own." Lucy stared at him, disbelief written across her features. "You want to take me with you, but you don't even know me." "I know enough," Preston said firmly. "I know what it's like to be alone in this world. I know what it's like to be sent away to strangers." He hesitated, then added more softly, "And I know I couldn't live with myself if I rode away and left you to that fate without offering an alternative." The stagecoach rumbled into view at the end of the street, and Lucy's eyes darted toward it, then back to Preston's face, searching for deception or cruelty. Finding none, she whispered, "Would they really want me?" "I can't promise they'll take to you right away," Preston admitted. "But I can promise you this. If they don't, I won't abandon you. We'll figure something else out together." The stage was pulling up now, its driver calling out final boarding. Sheriff Dawson emerged from his office, surprised to find Preston there. "Now this is truly where it gets good. Are they gonna take her, or she is going to spend the rest of her childhood at an orphanage?" "Drake, something I can help you with?" Preston stood facing the sheriff squarely. "I'd like to take responsibility for Lucy, if she's willing." The sheriff's eyebrows shot up. "You, no offense, but you're a drifter, Drake. What do you know about raising a child?" "Not much," Preston admitted. "But I'm taking that foreman job at the Circle B, stable position, decent house. The Blackwells are good people who might be willing to help." Sheriff Dawson frowned, unconvinced. "This isn't like adopting a stray pup, Drake. This is a child's life we're talking about." "I understand that," Preston replied firmly. "But I also understand what's waiting for her at that orphanage. I've been there, Sheriff. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy, let alone this little girl." The sheriff studied him for a long moment, then turned to Lucy. "What do you think, child? Would you rather go with Mr. Drake here than to the sisters?" Lucy looked between the two men, then up at the stagecoach driver who was becoming impatient. Her small hand reached out tentatively, finding Preston's larger one and gripping it tightly. "I want to go with Mr. Drake," she said, her voice stronger than it had been in days. Sheriff Dawson sighed, rubbing his chin. "I should insist on proper paperwork, guardianship documents." "We can handle that," Preston assured him. "I'll have the Blackwells send word once we're settled." "You have my word, Sheriff." After a moment's deliberation, Sheriff Dawson nodded reluctantly. "All right, Drake. I'm trusting you with this child's welfare. Don't make me regret it." By noon, Preston had purchased supplies for their journey and a gentle mare for Lucy to ride. He'd spent nearly all his savings, but as he watched her carefully stroke the horse's velvety nose, a tentative smile brightening her face, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. "Have you ridden before, Miss Lucy?" he asked as he adjusted the stirrups to accommodate her short legs. "Papa taught me a little," she replied. "We had a mule for the garden." "This here's Marigold," Preston said. "She's as sweet as they come. Just hold the reins like this, see, and I'll lead her until you're comfortable." Their journey began slowly, Preston keeping their pace gentle as Lucy adjusted to riding for longer stretches. They made camp early that first evening, and Preston was touched by how Lucy tried to help, gathering kindling for the fire and carefully arranging their bedrolls. As the campfire crackled between them and the stars appeared overhead, Lucy grew quiet, staring into the flames with an expression that seemed too solemn for her young face. "You all right?" Preston asked, passing her a tin plate of beans and bacon. "You think they'll like me?" she asked suddenly. "These people you're going to see?" Preston considered his answer carefully. The Blackwells are fair folks. Elaine's got a big heart and Ruddy, well, he pretends to be tougher than he is. He smiled reassuringly. But Lucy, if for some reason they don't take to you right away, that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. You understand? Lucy nodded, though she didn't look entirely convinced. What if they don't want me to stay? Then we'll find somewhere else, Preston said firmly. I made you a promise, and I aim to keep it. That night, as Lucy slept wrapped in her blanket, Preston sat by the dying embers of their fire, wondering what madness had possessed him to take responsibility for this child. He was no father figure. His own childhood had ended too abruptly for him to know what a proper father should be. Yet looking at Lucy's sleeping form, he felt a fierce protectiveness that surprised him with its intensity. What are you getting yourself into, Drake? He muttered to himself. Their second day of travel brought them through rougher country. By mid-afternoon, dark clouds had gathered on the horizon, and Preston frowned at the approaching storm. We need to find shelter, he told Lucy, scanning the landscape. There's a line shack that belongs to the Circle B about an hour's ride from here. We'll head there. The rain began just as the small cabin came into view, a simple one-room structure built for cowboys working the far reaches of the ranch. Preston hurried Lucy inside while he tended to the horses, securing them in the lean-to attached to the cabin. By the time he joined her, Lucy had already found the wood pile and was attempting to build a fire in the small stove, her face screwed up in concentration. You're doing a fine job, Preston praised, helping her arrange the kindling. Where'd you learn to build a fire? Papa taught me, she said simply. After Mama died, I had to help more. Preston nodded, struck by the resilience of this child who had lost so much yet continued forward. As the fire caught and warmth filled the small space, they settled in for the night, the storm raging outside. And that's it for today, folks. We hope you enjoyed this taste of the Wild West. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes of Saddle and Sixskin, because the adventure only continues. Will we reach the ranch tomorrow? Lucy asked as they shared a meal of jerky and hardtack. Should do, weather permitting, Preston confirmed. It's a big operation, cattle mainly, but some horses, too. The main house is up on a hill overlooking the valley. Pretty spot. And you'll be the foreman? Lucy asked, clearly trying to understand what their future might hold. That's right. Means I'll be organizing the ranch hands, planning the work, making sure everything runs smooth. Preston hesitated, then added, it also means I'll have a proper house, not just a bunk in the cowboys' quarters. Nothing fancy, mind you, but enough room for the both of us, if that's how things work out. Lucy nodded, processing this information. After a moment, she asked hesitantly, what should I call you? The question caught Preston off guard. Well, I suppose Preston or Pre is fine. Not P or anything like that. Preston felt a lump form in his throat. No, Lucy. I'm not trying to replace your P. Nobody could do that. But I hope maybe we can be friends, and I can be someone you can count on. Lucy seemed to accept this, nodding solemnly. And remember, as always, be sure to like and subscribe to Saddle and Sixskin. As the evening wore on and the rain continued to drum against the roof, Lucy began to nod off, her head eventually coming to rest against Preston's arm. Carefully, he arranged their bedrolls and settled her in for the night. As he tucked the blanket around her small shoulders, Lucy stirred and reached out, catching his hand. Please don't leave me, she whispered, her voice thick with sleep and lingering fear. Preston felt something crack open inside his chest, a tenderness he hadn't known he was capable of. Never again, he promised, his voice rough with emotion. You get some rest now. I'll be right here. True to his word, Preston stayed by her side through the night, keeping the fire stoked and listening to the storm gradually subside. By morning, the sky had cleared, leaving behind a freshly washed world that seemed full of possibilities. They reached the Circle B ranch by early afternoon the following day. The sprawling property was just as Preston had described, a picturesque valley dotted with grazing cattle with a large main house perched on a gentle rise. As they approached, a woman emerged onto the wide porch, shading her eyes against the sun. "Preston Drake, as I live and breathe," she called out, her face breaking into a warm smile. Elaine Blackwell was in her late 40s with streaks of silver in her dark hair and laugh lines around her kind eyes. "Ruddy said you might be coming, but I scarcely believed it. You never could stay in one place for long." Preston tipped his hat respectfully as they reached the house. "Mrs. Blackwell, it's good to see you again." Elaine's gaze shifted to Lucy, curiosity evident in her expression. "And who might this young lady be?" "This is Lucy Martin," Preston said, helping the girl down from her horse. "Lucy, this is Mrs. Blackwell." Lucy, suddenly shy, ducked her head and curtsied. "Pleased to meet you, madam." Elaine's eyes moved questioningly to Preston, who added, "Lucy's recently orphaned." I've taken responsibility for her." Elaine's eyebrows rose in surprise, but to her credit, she recovered quickly. "Well, you both must be exhausted from your journey. Come inside and have something to eat while you tell me all about it." The interior of the Blackwell home was comfortable without being ostentatious. Solid furniture, colorful quilts, and shelves lined with books suggesting a life of modest prosperity and genuine warmth. Elaine busied herself preparing a meal while Preston explained the circumstances that had brought Lucy into his care. "So, you just took her?" Elaine asked, her tone somewhere between incredulous and impressed. "I couldn't see her sent off to that orphanage," Preston said simply. "Not when I had another option to offer." Elaine's expression softened as she watched Lucy, who was cautiously exploring the kitchen, admiring the copper pots hanging from a rack. "And what exactly did you have in mind for her here?" Preston shifted uncomfortably. "I thought, well, I hoped that maybe you and Mr. Blackwell might be willing to help." "I know it's a lot to ask." "It is," Elaine agreed, but there was no rebuke in her tone. "Raising a child is no small undertaking, Preston. Have you truly thought this through?" "Not entirely," he admitted. "But I made her a promise, and I aim to keep it." Elaine studied him for a long moment, then nodded decisively. "Well, the foreman's house has been sitting empty since old Jim retired. It's got 2 bedrooms. Nothing fancy, but solid enough. You'll need furniture, of course, and supplies." Relief washed over Preston. "So, you're not opposed to us staying?" "Opposed?" Preston Drake. "I've been telling Ruddy for years that this ranch needs more life in it than just a bunch of weathered cowboys." Her eyes twinkled. "Having a child around might be just the thing to brighten the place up." When Ruddy Blackwell returned from checking the northern pastures that evening, he was equally surprised by the unexpected addition to his ranch, but not displeased. A burly man with a booming voice and a reputation for fairness. He quickly took to Lucy, especially after she showed interest in a litter of kittens that had recently been born in the barn. "Girls got a good way with animals," he noted approvingly as Lucy gently handled the tiny creatures. "Might make a rancher yet." Over dinner that night, plans were made. Preston would assume his duties as foreman immediately, with Lucy staying at the main house until the foreman's cabin could be properly prepared. Elaine promised to help outfit the place with necessities and to speak with the schoolteacher in the nearby town about enrolling Lucy once they were settled. "School?" Lucy looked up in surprise. "I get to go to school?" "Of course, child," Elaine said warmly. "Every young person needs an education." Later, as Preston walked Lucy to the guest room where she would sleep, she tugged at his sleeve. "Are we really staying here for good?" Preston knelt down to her level. "If that's what you want, yes. The Blackwells seem happy to have us, and it's good, honest work for me." Lucy's eyes filled with unexpected tears. "Thank you," she whispered, throwing her arms around his neck in a fierce hug. Preston, startled by the display of affection, awkwardly patted her back. You're welcome, Lucy. Now, get some rest. We've got a busy day tomorrow. The weeks that followed were filled with activity as Preston settled into his role as foreman and Lucy adjusted to her new life at the Circle B. But remember, we are on YouTube. Please consider liking and subscribing if you feel inclined. The foreman's cabin was transformed into a cozy home with Elaine contributing curtains and quilts and Ruddy arranging for proper furniture to be delivered from town. Lucy's presence on the ranch brought an unexpected joy to everyone. The cowboys, initially awkward around the small girl, soon found themselves being roped into teaching her to lasso or letting her help with the gentler horses. Elaine, who had never had children of her own, delighted in introducing Lucy to cooking and gardening. For Preston, the adjustment to having a child in his care was both more challenging and more rewarding than he had anticipated. Used to answering to no one but himself, he now found his days shaped by Lucy's needs and schedule. Yet there was a satisfaction in watching her flourish that he had never experienced before. One evening, about a month after their arrival, Preston returned from a long day of work to find Lucy sitting on their porch steps, her face troubled. "Everything all right?" he asked, settling beside her. "Billy Jenkins said you're not really my pa," she blurted out. "He said you just felt sorry for me." Preston sighed, removing his hat and running a hand through his hair. "Billy Jenkins needs to mind his own business," he said mildly. "But he's right, I'm not your father, Lucy. You know that." Lucy nodded, her gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "But why did you take me with you? Was it just because you felt sorry for me?" "Partly," Preston admitted, seeing no point in lying. "But it was more than that. When I saw you sitting there outside the sheriff's office, I remembered how it felt to be in your shoes. I remembered what it was like to have nobody fighting for me." He paused, struggling to find the right words. "I guess I wanted to be the person I wished I'd had when I was your age." Lucy considered this. "Do you ever wish you hadn't brought me, when I'm being difficult, or when you have to come to school meetings instead of working?" Preston was surprised by the question. "Not once," he said firmly. "Not for a single moment. You're the best decision I ever made, Lucy Martin." A small smile curved her lips. "I'm glad you took me with you." "So am I," Preston replied, surprising himself with how deeply he meant it. As summer turned to fall and then to winter, life at the Circle B settled into a comfortable rhythm. And if you want to see how things progress, like the story of these characters, then make sure to like and subscribe to Saddle and Sixkin for more tales to come. Lucy attended the small school in town, riding in with Preston when his duties took him there, or with one of the ranch hands when they made supply runs. Her initial shyness gave way to a quiet confidence, and she made friends among the other ranch and town children. Preston's role as guardian evolved naturally. He learned to braid Lucy's hair when she asked, though his first attempts were clumsy at best. He sat with her in the evenings as she completed her schoolwork, marveling at how quickly she absorbed new knowledge. And on the difficult nights when memories of her parents surfaced and grief overwhelmed her, he learned to provide the comfort she needed, sometimes with words, sometimes with simple presence. It was during one of these moments, as they sat by the fire on the anniversary of her father's death, that Lucy asked the question that had been on her mind. "Preston, do you think you'll ever get married?" The question caught him off guard. "I hadn't given it much thought," he admitted. "Why do you ask?" Lucy shrugged, poking at the fire with a stick. "Molly Taylor's pa got remarried after her ma died. She says her new ma is nice, but different." Preston studied her face carefully. "Would it bother you if I did get married?" "I mean, depends," Lucy said thoughtfully. "If she was nice, I wouldn't mind, especially if she could cook better than you." A small smile played at the corners of her mouth. Preston laughed. "My cooking's not that bad." "It really is." Lucy giggled, her somber mood lightening. "Mrs. Blackwell says, you burn water." Their easy banter continued, but Preston found himself turning Lucy's question over in his mind long after she had gone to bed. At 33, he had never seriously considered marriage or a family. His life had been defined by movement, by the next horizon. Now, with roots beginning to take hold, he found himself wondering about possibilities he'd never before entertained. The answer to Lucy's question arrived unexpectedly that spring in the form of Rebecca Burnett, the new school teacher who replaced the retiring Mrs. Harper. And the story will continue on the next installment of Saddle and Sixskin, but if you want to keep the channel alive and have more and more of this, then make sure to like and subscribe, so we can do more stories. Preston first encountered her during a school meeting where her intelligence and no-nonsense approach immediately impressed him. Rebecca was 28, unmarried, and determined to bring quality education to the children of the Western Territories. With auburn hair typically restrained in a practical bun and keen hazel eyes that missed nothing, she cut a striking figure in the small frontier community. "Mr. Drake," she greeted him after the meeting. "I wanted to compliment you on Lucy's progress. Her compositions are remarkably thoughtful for a child her age." Preston felt an unexpected warmth at the praise. "She's a smart girl," he said proudly. "Always has her nose in a book these days." "That's to be encouraged," Rebecca smiled. "Though I've noticed she struggles somewhat with arithmetic. Perhaps some additional practice at home would be beneficial." Preston nodded, mentally noting to make time for it. "I will work on it. Thank you for letting me know, Miss Burnett." As he turned to leave, Rebecca added, "Mr. Drake, the school is organizing a picnic next Sunday after services. All families are welcome. Lucy mentioned you might be interested in helping build the game stations." Preston, who had rarely participated in community events before Lucy came into his life, found himself agreeing before he'd fully considered it. "I'd be happy to help. Lucy enjoys these gatherings." "Excellent," Rebecca replied, her smile brightening her serious face. "We'll look forward to seeing you both there." The school picnic proved to be a turning point. As Preston helped construct simple game stations for the children, he found himself working alongside Rebecca, whose practical efficiency was matched by an unexpected sense of humor. Their conversation flowed easily from topics of education to books they had both read, to gentle debates about the future of the territories. "You have strong opinions for a cowboy, Mr. Drake," Rebecca observed as they disagreed about the railroad's impact on small communities. "Former cowboy," Preston corrected. "I'm a rancher now, got roots and responsibilities." "So I've heard." Rebecca nodded toward where Lucy was playing with her friends. "It was quite remarkable what you did for her." Preston shrugged uncomfortably. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Rebecca said firmly. "They wouldn't have. Most people find it easier to look away from others' suffering. It takes a special kind of courage to step in when you're not obligated to do so." Her words stayed with Preston long after the picnic ended, as did the memory of her smile and the animated way she used her hands when discussing something she cared about. Over the following months, Preston found reasons to visit town more frequently than his duties strictly required. Sometimes he brought Lucy to borrow books from the small library where Rebecca volunteered on Saturdays. Other times he offered to deliver school supplies that Elaine had organized from the neighboring ranches. Lucy, observant beyond her years, quickly noticed the pattern. "You like Miss Burnett?" she stated matter-of-factly one evening as they rode home from town. Preston nearly choked. "She's a fine teacher," he managed. Lucy rolled her eyes with the dramatic flair of a child approaching her 10th birthday. "Not like that. You like her, you get all tongue-tied around her and your ears turn red." "They do not," Preston protested, resisting the urge to check. "Do too," Lucy grinned. "It's okay. I like her, too. She never treats me like I'm stupid when I ask questions." Preston cleared his throat awkwardly. "Would it bother you if I called on Miss Burnett properly? I mean..." Lucy considered this seriously. "No," she decided, "but you should bring flowers. Ladies like flowers." Preston chuckled. Is that so? And how would you know what ladies like, young miss? I heard Mrs. Blackwell telling Cook that Mr. Blackwell still brings her wildflowers sometimes, and that's why she married him even though her father didn't approve, Lucy informed him. And in my book, the lady always smiles when she gets flowers. Taking his young ward's advice to heart, Preston gathered his courage and a bouquet of wildflowers and called on Rebecca the following Sunday after church services. His formal request to escort her to dinner was met with a surprised but pleased acceptance. Their courtship progressed steadily through the summer and into fall. Rebecca proved to be not only intelligent and principled, but also possessed of a warm heart that extended naturally to include Lucy in their outings and conversations. For her part, Lucy thrived under the additional female attention, especially when Rebecca introduced her to botany and began teaching her to identify the native plants of the region. By Christmas, Preston knew with certainty that his feelings for Rebecca had deepened into love. And on that cliffhanger, we will leave it at for today. But I make sure that everyone knows how important it is to support these channels, especially since you are enjoying the content. Please like and subscribe to Saddle and Sixskin today. On a crisp winter evening with Lucy's enthusiastic assistance, he prepared a special dinner at their cabin and asked Rebecca to become his wife. You understand that Lucy and I are a package deal, he said seriously as they stood before the fireplace, her hands in his. I made her a promise, and I intend to keep it. Rebecca's eyes softened. I would never ask you to break that promise, Preston. Lucy is a remarkable child, and I've grown to love her deeply. I hope in time she might come to think of me as family, too, though I know I can never replace her mother. Preston felt a weight lift from his shoulders. So, is that a yes, Miss Burnett? It is indeed, Mr. Drake. Rebecca smiled, rising on tiptoes to seal their engagement with a kiss. They were married in the spring of 1881 in a simple ceremony at the small church in town. Lucy served as Rebecca's maid of honor, beaming with pride in her new blue dress as she stood beside the woman who would become her stepmother. Ruddy Blackwell hosted the celebration at the ranch afterward, where cowboys and townspeople alike gathered to wish the new family well. As the evening wore on, Preston found a quiet moment with Lucy, who was watching the dancers with a contented expression. Happy? He asked, settling beside her on the porch steps. Very. She confirmed, leaning against his arm. Are you? Preston looked across the yard to where Rebecca was laughing with Elaine, her face glowing in the lantern light. More than I ever thought possible, he admitted. I knew you'd like her when you met her, Lucy said with the satisfaction of a matchmaker whose plans had come to fruition. Preston chuckled, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Is that so? And here I thought I was the one making the decisions in this family. Lucy grinned up at him. You keep thinking that if it makes you feel better. As they sat together watching the celebration, Preston reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought them to this moment. 2 years ago, he had been a solitary drifter with no thought beyond the next horizon. Now he was a husband, a guardian, a man with roots and responsibilities, and he wouldn't trade it for anything. You know, he said softly. That day in Willow Creek when you asked me not to leave you, I made you a promise never again. Lucy nodded, remembering. That's right. And I want you to know that promise still stands. Rebecca joining our family doesn't change that. We're in this together, all three of us, now. Lucy's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but her smile was radiant. I know, she said simply. That's what makes us a family. Rebecca joined them then, settling on Lucy's other side. What are you two plotting over here? She asked warmly. Just talking about family, Preston replied, his eyes meeting hers over Lucy's head with a depth of love that still surprised him. Well, speaking of family, Rebecca said, a mysterious smile playing at her lips. I may have some news to share with you both later. Lucy's eyes widened. Are we getting a puppy? Rebecca laughed, exchanging a meaningful glance with Preston. Not exactly. But if all goes well, by next Christmas, our family might be growing in a different way. Understanding dawned on Preston's face, followed by a joy so profound it nearly overwhelmed him. As Lucy peppered Rebecca with questions about babies and when and how, Preston watched his newfound family with a heart full of gratitude. From a chance encounter with an orphan child to finding love and building a home, his life had transformed in ways he could never have imagined. All because he had made a promise: never again would Lucy face the world alone. And in keeping that promise, Preston Drake had found the home and family he hadn't known he was searching for all along. What an ending. Please make sure to like and subscribe to Saddle and Sixskin so you can enjoy the next installment.